Welcome to the Embracing Neurodiversity podcast, where I share my journey of embracing the experience of my amazing son who is on the spectrum. I am Ivory, a mother, educator, and personal growth enthusiast. My goal is to offer insight and stories that may inspire you on your own parenting journey. Thank you for tuning in. Hey, everybody. Welcome back. Thank you for tuning in to the Embracing Neurodiversity podcast. If you have not noticed by now, my name is Ivory. I am the host of the Embracing Neurodiversity podcast, and this is a podcast for parents by a parent of a neurodiverse child. I'm a mother of a 7-year-old boy who is on the autism spectrum. I'm also a 15-year educator who has worked with other children who are neurodiverse. And I have done a lot of other work in the education and coaching space. This platform is a space for me to not only discuss my professional and lived experience as an autism mom to provide you with some practical strategies, but it also is a space for me to unpack a lot of my own personal experiences as it relates to being a mom of a child who is neurodiverse. It is, as you all know who are listening, because you probably are a parent or caregiver or know someone who is. Being a parent of a neurodiverse child is a incredibly unique experience, but the reality is it's not as rare as we would like to think that it is, right? If we know that 1 in 36 young people are diagnosed with autism, then we know that at minimum, twice as many parents are having a unique experience, right? And and neurodiversity is not just autism, even though my son is autistic. It also encompasses children who experience ADHD and children who are dyslexic, right? And so while these diagnoses are unique and have variables in terms of the experience parent by parent, there is no one template. There are some trends and some connections along the way in terms of what it means to parent and how it impacts you as a parent. And I feel compelled and inspired to talk through that in a authentic and relatable way. And so I don't know why I felt the need to give that re-intro. I think because it's been a couple of weeks since I've recorded it, so I just kind of wanted to re-norm and recenter what we do here and why we exist. Today I wanted to talk through and unpack meltdowns again. I've spoken about meltdowns in the past, and I believe I did a podcast specifically how to navigate meltdowns, right, with your child. But I wanted to revisit it today, and I'll tell you in a minute why. But just so that we all are on the same page and have clear understanding, a meltdown is not a tantrum, right? It's not a toddler tantrum or a child tantrum. A meltdown is a response that a lot of young children, but maybe older children, teens, or adults who are autistic experience when they are either feeling like they have had sensory overload or if they have had a sensory underload, right? And so, again, when we think about our senses, they're typically 5, right? Hearing, smelling, touching, feeling, tasting. And for many people who are on the autism spectrum, and I'm not autistic, and so I'm only speaking about this through the lens of a parent and from an advocacy space and from what I observe and see with my child. But for those who are autistic, specifically when I'm speaking about my son, they have certain sensitivities to certain sensories, and it's different for each person, right? And so sometimes hearing loud noises can be overwhelming or can create a sense of frustration or ability, right? Or maybe too bright of lights or too dark lights. For example, my son Khalil likes all of the lights on in the house. I do not. And so we're always in this battle with turning lights on and off in different parts of our home. But I do understand that it's sensory seeking, and so more often than not, I typically acquiesce and I allow him to keep the lights on, even if it's noon and the sun is bright and there's natural light in the house. He still wants the fluorescent lights on. It's a slight pet peeve, but this is a easy compromise for a parent raising a neurodiverse child, because I do understand that if you don't accommodate a lot of their sensory seeking needs, it could result in a meltdown, right? So that's one. And another example could be visually, when we talk about seeing in terms of sensory, too much access to technology, or I know a lot of us as parents, we have this internal struggle and guilt around how often do we give them their iPads or their tablets and that video time, right? What's too much time, particularly for our children who are autistic and are not always engaged socially with young people their age and kind of prefer to do their own thing. Their iPad or their tablet is usually a source of entertainment for them, but also it can be a source of regulation for them in a myriad of ways. And so we tend to allow them to have their technology more often than a child who is neurotypical. However, from my own experience, I've noticed that Khalil can get overwhelmed and frustrated, and he displays traits of having sensory overload when he has had too much time on his iPad, or when he's watched a YouTube video one too many times. If you are an autism parent and you know that if you have a child who likes YouTube, they're probably watching the same YouTube video in the same time frame, in the same loop over and over and over. And that's okay. That's a way that they not only keep themselves regulated, but it is a special interest of theirs, and they should have that. But they're also human too, and the brain can only absorb so much. And so I've seen times where Khalil gets irritated or frustrated after having too much time with his iPad. And so I have to obviously confiscate it, and we take a break from it. And then we also kind of just take breaks throughout the day when it comes to his iPad, just to be preventative. So that's another tip. And we'll continue to unpack ways to navigate meltdowns and even how to be preventative of them. And so taking those mental breaks throughout the day from technology. And when you think about it, like, all human beings need that, right? I just recorded 15 minutes of content not knowing that my microphone was off the entire time. It was some good information too, but we're going to try this again. Okay, so I was talking about how sometimes sensory overload can cause a meltdown. So with Khalil, like, a lot of times him being on his iPad and engaging in YouTube videos, he gets overwhelmed. He gets overwhelmed by it because it's just like, I don't know if it's the imagery, the music, the sounds, but his brain just gets overwhelmed by it. And that's the most simplest way I can explain it. And it can begin to trigger frustration and then a meltdown. And so when you think about sensory input, sensory seekers, or people who need less stimuli and don't like a lot of sensory input, the best way to understand it and relate it to yourself is because we all have it. It's just some of us experience sensory triggers more extreme than others. But it's almost like, when you hear the scratched nail on chalkboard, and a lot of people are like, oh, that's too much, that's a lot. Like someone who is not on the autism spectrum, that could be a lot for. That is an example of your sensories are feeling overwhelmed or being triggered by something, and then you just don't feel comfortable in your skin. And for children, that can result in a meltdown, understandably so. And so one of the things that I've learned to do, and I've gotten to this place of remaining calm during Khalil's meltdowns, that has helped me out tremendously. I'm just like in a space now where I'm realizing Khalil had a meltdown the other day, and I was like, talking to myself like, I've grown so much since, the first time he had a meltdown a couple years ago up until now. Like, I remember the first time. I don't know what the average age of a child when they begin to have meltdowns, but for Khalil, it felt like it was kind of late. He was around 5, and it was a very minute thing around seatbelts and in the car, and not putting the seatbelt on the right timing, and he just lost it. Because of the other thing that sort of triggers meltdowns for Khalil, and perhaps it's for other children who are on the spectrum, is Khalil sometimes exhibits obsessive compulsive traits in terms of wanting things to be done a certain way, and when they are not, it can create frustration and in the sense of overwhelmingness for him. So another simple way that I can try to explain it is if your brain is going 1,000 miles per hour with 1,000 thoughts, and you're trying to organize your thoughts, but they're just looping. That is what I imagine. I'm not in my son's brain. Most of us as parents, we want to be, but we're not. But that is what I ascertain oftentimes is happening. And so, of course, you're going to cry, you're going to scream, you're going to kick, you're going to punch, you're going to want to do whatever you can to quiet the noise. So when Khalil had his first meltdown, I was like a mess. I couldn't believe it. I was sort of like, one of the things that I'm most happy for is when it comes to my son, is that like he's a relatively happy child, joyful child, playful child. He smiles a lot, and he is good natured, right? But he's human, so he has moments where he is not. But I never had seen this level of behavior in terms of the level of anger that he had, where he was crying and screaming, and it almost was like he wasn't there, like he wasn't present, hitting himself, and and so it was completely heartbreaking to watch. I cried for hours after, and then I probably cried thereafter for a couple of days, and I was just like, it cannot be this way. Like, I know this is not our lives. I know this cannot be our lives forever. And so I embarked upon ways to not only prevent it, but to manage it while it's happening, and to support healthy regulation skills so that he can begin to manage his own emotions, so that he doesn't have to resort to meltdown at some point. Because the other thing about meltdowns is, like, of course it's incredibly hard to watch when you are a parent, but I would imagine it's hard to experience as a child, right? Because there's a myth that like a meltdown is a choice, or that it's intentional, when in actuality it's not. It's a response to, again, various things, but the simplest way is a response to feeling overwhelmed. And so I began to think about, like, I've made so much progress in learning how to be patient and learning how to be calm with Khalil when he is having a moment of frustration and moments of meltdowns. And one of the ways that I've learned to be calm and patient, and the more he gets, the more I get centered within myself. Obviously, within reason, I try to stay in his vicinity to make sure that he's safe and things around him are safe. But one of the things I was able to do was to really get comfortable with my own emotions, right? That was the goal. Like, we tend to want our children to stop crying or to minimize meltdowns because we're uncomfortable with the emotion that comes from that. And of course, it can be unsafe sometimes too, so you want to make sure that it's safe. But more than anything, it's the emotion that we are uncomfortable with. And so the more I got comfortable with my own emotions, the more I was comfortable with allowing Khalil to have his emotions. More often than not, and I'm not perfect, and I still have days where, first of all, there is no idea of perfection, but I have days where Khalil is getting frustrated or he wants to cry about something. I could feel my stomach tighten up, like I want to be like, stop crying, because that's how I was raised. The adults in my life did not tolerate a child having emotions for whatever reason. They deemed that to be inappropriate or disrespectful. And so I was taught and told often to stop crying, or I'm gonna give you something to cry about. And as a parent. And so what I learned to do was to suppress my emotions, and then it wasn't until I was an adult where I actually had to undo the work and really coach myself to become emotional again. I'm a naturally emotional person, but I suppressed it for years, and now that I'm in this self-healing phase in my life, I literally have to tell myself sometimes, like, it's okay to cry, go ahead, and then I commence to allowing myself that. But in doing that, I was able to create space for Khalil to do the same thing. Dr. Shafali writes about this in her book. She says that oftentimes we as parents find it difficult to see our children in pain. We want to fix it. We want to make it right. Like, this is probably the most difficult thing to do, is to see your child in pain, whether it's physical or emotional pain. But what's important for us to know and understand is that our children need to have those experiences in order to build resiliency and to be full actualized human beings in the world. To be a human being is to have a range of emotions and to allow them to take their course. Oftentimes when we suppress our emotions, they turn into anger and resentment and anxiety and depression, and these things that come about from not honoring how you feel about an experience. And so the number one strategy I would recommend is, the more your child becomes escalated, the calmer you become, right? And so that requires being mindful of how you're feeling, take those breathing techniques, staying present with yourself, telling yourself it's okay. Also, not feeling like you need to be a savior in this moment and interject, but to sit calmly and objectively and allow your child to have the emotions. If they come to you with wanting to be soothed, of course you soothe, and you maybe give some affirming language, but not too much, because you want them to be able to navigate and come to their own way of being based on how they're feeling in the moment. But really, managing a meltdown requires you to become less reactive and more present and more patient. The primary way to do that is not even just in the moment, but again, this is why I say it's important to incorporate daily self-care strategies in terms of your own meditation or affirmation practice. Whatever it is that you do, you're journaling, you're sitting silently within yourself, you are finding ways to find contentment regardless of the circumstance around you. And I promise you, when you begin to do those things, you are also modeling that for your child. And so the number one way, and I know people won't be like, really, girl, but like literally one of the primary way to help your child manage and regulate their emotions is to manage and regulate your own. It's not about fixing your child's emotions or giving them language to help them to stop their emotions or bribing them with things. No, it's actually about sitting and allowing them to have the emotion. If they're having a crazy, ugly cry, you sit calmly and allow them to have the cry and say, it's okay. I know. It's okay. Yeah, so yeah, I had a lot of recording that was not actually being recorded, and so this is my second take, but I hope that the message has been relayed. And so until next time, I hope you all take care of yourselves. In the meantime, please continue to like, share, and subscribe. You can also find me on Instagram, Facebook, all the places. Also, we have our children's book that is now published and ready for the world. Come on, Khalil. It's a story loosely inspired by my son and our experience with navigating the world with speech difficulties. And so we'd love for you to support that as well. Until next time, I hope y'all have a great week.